Focus on money, and we will make money. Focus on impact, and we will make an impact. It sounds kind of like a bumper sticker, doesn't it? But when when you actually stop and think about the mechanics of that statement, the actual engineering of it, it gets complicated.
Fast.
It really does. That's Simon Sinek, of course. And he's identifying this fundamental split in how we orient our lives. It's so deceptively simple.
Right.
We tend to think those two things, money and impact, are, correlated. Like, if I get rich enough, impacts will just sort of happen.
They'll follow naturally.
Exactly. But Sinek, and I think the whole stack of sources we have today, they're all arguing that these are actually distinct operating systems. You have to choose which one you're running.
And that is the mission for this deep dive. We are looking at what we're calling the architecture of impact.
Yeah.
And I have to say, looking at the source list today, I feel like we're assembling a very strange dinner party.
We have Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. We have Seth Godin, the modern marketing sage.
Yeah.
We've got Martin Luther King Jr. And then we take this hard left turn into Olympic weightlifting with Coach Dan John and the sorcery of Carlos Castañeda.
It is an eclectic mix, I'll grant you that. But there is a very sturdy thread tying all these disparate voices together. They are all grappling with the same transition.
I guess.
Moving from passive accumulation, which is basically, waiting for instructions and collecting stuff, to active creation.
Where you stop waiting and you start writing the story yourself.
You got it.
Because that passive accumulation is the default setting, right? It's the factory setting for us. We're just hardwired to gather resources.
We absolutely are. It's evolutionary, gather nuts, survive winter. But we live in a world where that instinct has, it's gone into overdrive. And today is about understanding why that obsession with accumulation is actually a trap.
And how to break out of it.
And how to break out of it to build something that actually lasts.
Okay, let's start with that trap then. You brought in some heavy Stoic philosophy to kick this off, specifically focusing on what we're calling the tyranny of accumulation. Marcus Aurelius has this observation that is, it's pretty withering.
It is. I mean, you have to remember, Marcus Aurelius wasn't some monk living in a cave. This was the most powerful man on the planet. He had everything.
Right.
And yet, he looked around at his peers, the wealthy elite of Rome, and he was just baffled. He saw people spending their entire lives pinching pennies, maneuvering for status, sacrificing their relationship.
And their peace of mind.
Their peace of mind, all to build these massive portfolios.
And his critique wasn't just that they were greedy. It was that they were illogical.
Precisely. He pointed out the irony that all this effort was for something that becomes utterly irrelevant the moment they die. The Stoics had a way of cutting through the noise,
Yeah.
And there's this phrase that just sums it up perfectly. It is very cheap to be dead.
It is very cheap to be dead.
Yeah.
Wow, that stops you in your tracks. It sounds so morbid. But when you strip away the emotion, it's just a financial fact.
It's an ROI calculation. Think about it. We spend decades stressing over the cost of living, but the cost of dying,
It's zero.
it's zero. Once you're gone, your overhead vanishes. All that portfolio building, the real estate, the IP rights, that entire construct becomes instantly irrelevant to you. You are no longer the user of the interface you spent 50 years building.
There's that story from the Roman poet Juvenal about Alexander the Great that you put in the notes.
Yeah.
I think that illustrates this better than anything.
Oh, it's a classic. So Alexander the Great, while he was alive, he was just consumed by ambition. He famously wept because there were no more worlds to conquer.
The entire globe wasn't big enough to contain his ego.
Not even close. But Juvenal points out the stark reality of the end. He says, death alone reveals how small are the puny bodies of men.
Because in the end, he didn't need a continent.
Nope.
He needed a box.
Exactly. A simple coffin. The analysis here isn't that money is evil or that ambition is bad. It's a critique of utility.
And permanence.
And permanence. If your entire life's focus is on accumulation, you are building a legacy that you're biologically incapable of experiencing. You're playing a game where the prize disappears the moment you cross the finish line.
Okay, so if we accept the premise that the bank account is a trap, or at least, a game with a very distinct expiration date, what do we replace it with? We can't just sit around contemplating our mortality all day.
No.
We have to do something.
This is where we have to pivot from what we get to what we do. And to understand that shift, we have to look at Seth Godin's concept of awaiting instructions.
I want to push back on this a little bit, actually.
Yeah.
Because awaiting instructions is framed as a negative here. But isn't that just efficiency?
How so?
We have Checklists for a reason.
Yeah.
Pilots use them. Surgeons use them. I don't want my pilot getting creative at 30,000 feet.
That's a crucial distinction. And Godin isn't talking about safety protocols or, necessary competence. He's talking about the industrialization of our spirit.
Okay.
We've been conditioned since kindergarten to trade compliance for safety. If I do exactly what the teacher says, I get an A. If I do exactly what the boss says, I get a paycheck.
So the checklist becomes a hiding place.
Exactly. It's a way to abdicate responsibility. It's the difference between asking what happens next versus what will I do now?
Well,
The first question, what happens next, is passive. It implies the future is something that happens to you. It's safe. If the project fails, you can say, well, I just followed the instructions.
whereas what will I do now puts a gun in your hand.
It places the burden entirely on you, and that is terrifying. It means making choices without perfect information. It means you can't blame the algorithm or the economy if it goes wrong. But Godin argues that this surrender of agency is exactly what kills impact. You can make money following instructions. You can be a very well-paid cog, but you cannot make an impact that way. Impact requires the courage to go off script.
And we have probably the most potent example of going off script in American history in the stack today.
We do.
Martin Luther King Jr.
The ultimate case study in rejecting the checklist. Think about the context of the 1950s and 60s. The instructions for an African-American man in the South were very, very clear.
Keep your head down. Accept the status quo. Survive.
Exactly. And even for a leader, the safe path would have been to simply catalog the failures.
Right? He could have just been a critic. He could have stood at the podium and listed every injustice, every broken law, painted a bleak picture, and just stopped there. And it would have been accurate.
It would have been accurate, but it wouldn't have been generative. Critics point at the fire. Leaders build the fire station.
I like that.
King didn't just complain about what was. He held up a mirror to America based on its own founding fathers' ideals, justice, freedom, equality, and he said, we can live up to this. He created a vision of what the country should be, rather than just documenting what it was.
That distinction between documenting reality and creating a new one, that's huge.
Mm.
But let's not pretend that's easy. It's not just thinking positive.
Mm.
The sources mention this creates a serious internal conflict.
Oh, absolutely. King was very open about the toll this takes. He said, there is something of a civil war going on within all of our lives. He described it as the recalcitrant south of our soul revolting against the north of our soul.
That is such a powerful image. The Civil War isn't just a chapter in a history book. It's a daily psychological state. The part of us that wants to be lazy or hateful or just safe versus the part that wants to be better.
And that civil war brings us to the practical side of this deep dive. If we have this internal conflict and we have this external pressure to just accumulate and follow instructions, how do we actually win that war?
How do we maintain that focus on impact day to day?
Yeah.
The sources suggest it starts with our eyes. Literally how we perceive the world around us. And this takes us back to Marcus Aurelius.
Right, but specifically his relationship with his rhetoric teacher, a guy named Fronto.
Which is a fascinating relationship.
It is. Fronto taught the emperor to look at the world like a poet, not a politician. He taught him to find beauty in the mundane, or even in the ugly.
Okay, give us an example, because when I think of ugly, I don't usually think opportunity for impact.
Well, there's a famous passage where Marcus writes about the foam dripping from a boar's mouth, or the frown of a lion. He talks about the cracks in a loaf of bread.
Wait, cracks in bread?
Yes. He observes that when bread bakes, it bursts open in places. Now, technically, that's a failure of the baker's form.
It's an imperfection.
But Marcus says those cracks catch the eye and stir the appetite.
So he's reframing the imperfection as the hook, as the interesting part.
Exactly. Einstein said something similar. God reveals himself in the orderly harmony of what exists. Meaning-making is an act of creation. If you're waiting for a perfect sunset to feel awe, you're passive. The architecture of impact requires you to look at the cracked bread, or the difficult colleague, or the chaotic project, and see the geometry of beauty in it.
Which reminds me of that Gandhi story in our notes. This one made me laugh, but it's also weirdly profound.
The mud pack story.
Yeah. Set the scene for us.
So Mahatma Gandhi is sitting with a reporter. He's got some stomach pain, so he's applied a mud pack to his abdomen. He catches the reporter staring at it, and Gandhi just smiles and says, "This puts me in touch with my future."
That is some dark humor right there.
It is, but it's also a lesson in acceptance. He's joking that we will all eventually be packed in mud or ash. It's an acceptance of mortality not with fear, but with grace.
Right.
And that's the key. When you stop fearing the end, you stop frantically trying to accumulate against it. You can just be present.
Okay, speaking of being present, I need to pause us here. We've been talking about Roman emperors, civil rights leaders, marketing geniuses, very high-level intellectual stuff. And now, looking at the stack, we're pivoting to a strength coach and a mystic. I feel like we just took a hard left turn. How does Olympic weightlifting fit into a philosophy of impact?
It does seem like a stretch, doesn't it? But this is actually the missing link. We tend to think of impact as this purely intellectual exercise, writing the manifesto, giving the speech. We act like brains on sticks floating from meeting to meeting.
I feel seen. That is definitely my average Tuesday.
Right. But the sources, specifically Carlos Castaneda and Coach Dan John, they argue that you cannot separate the will from the vehicle. Castaneda writes, "Perceive with the whole body. The body is an awareness, and it should be treated impeccable."
Impeccable. That's a high bar.
It is. It means the body isn't just a taxi for your brain. It's an intelligence system. If you are disconnected from your physical self, you are missing half the data.
Okay.
And this connects directly to Dan John.
Who is a legend in the lifting world.
He is. And he talks about the goal of the Olympic lifts, the snatch, the clean and jerk. These are violent, complex movements. And the goal isn't just moving weight from A to B.
What is it then?
It's being one piece, the integration of body and will. If your mind is thinking about the grocery list and your body is trying to move 200 pounds overhead, you don't just miss the lift. You get hurt.
So it's about integration. You can't have a high-impact mind in an absentee body.
Exactly. Impact requires presence. You have to be one piece when you walk into a room. People can feel when you're fragmented.
There's a sequence in the notes here. It's attributed to Hemingway, though it sounds a bit like a modernized proverb, that acts almost like an algorithm for this kind of integrated living.
The list of befores?
Yeah, it's a great sequence. Listen before you lead. Earn before you spend. Forgive before you pray. Try before you quit. I want to stop on listen before you lead. It sounds like a cliche we'd see on a motivational poster. But in the context of what we just discussed about being one piece,
right,
it's actually really hard to do.
It is incredibly hard. Because to really listen to sell one cafe what one cafe buys, as the notes put it, you have to shut down your own internal noise. You can't be planning your rebuttal while the other person is talking.
Which goes back to that idea of awaiting instructions versus agency. If I'm just waiting for my turn to speak, I'm following a script.
You're not present.
If I'm listening, I'm actually present.
Exactly. And look at the last one. Try before you quit.
That one stands out to me. It implies that most of us quit before we've actually made a genuine attempt. We quit at the thought of failure.
Or we quit at the first sign of discomfort. Dan John would say we quit because we aren't one piece. The mind wants the result, but the body rejects the effort. Impact requires the discipline to align those two things.
Right.
As Gandhi said, an ounce of practice is worth more than a ton of preaching. You have to physically show up.
But here is the danger zone. We talk about high standards, being impeccable, relentless practice, being one piece. I mean, it sounds exhausting.
It does.
And frankly, it sounds like a recipe for beating yourself up every single time you slept.
That is the trap.
Yeah.
And that is why we have to balance this whole architecture with self-compassion. If you turn the pursuit of impact into a stick to beat yourself with, you've totally missed the point.
The sources bring in Deborah Day here, who basically just says, lighten up.
Gently accept your humanness. You are going to fall short. That civil war inside you.
Yeah.
Sometimes the wrong side wins a battle. Sometimes the recalcitrant South takes over for a day.
And if you beat yourself up, you're just wasting energy that could go into the next attempt.
Exactly. And we have to reinterpret what strength looks like here. The notes bring up the biblical instruction to turn the other cheek.
Okay.
Now, culturally, we often see that as weakness or passivity, like you're a doormat.
Right, like you're just letting people walk all over you. Oh, you hit me here, hit me again.
But look at it through the lens of impact. To turn the other cheek requires incredible inner strength. It is the refusal to let someone else's darkness dictate your reaction. It's saying, I am so centered, so in control of my own impact, that your violence cannot break my composure.
That is a huge shift. It's not submission, it's self-possession.
Precisely. And that requires being gentle with yourself when you do lose your cool. Because you will. It's about the process. Bob Rotella, the sports psychologist, says, the process, not the end result, enriches life.
And there's that great line about dancing. Focus on your goals and dance through all other distractions.
The verb is key there. Dance, not grind, not fight.
Chance.
Dance. There is a lightness to it. If you were grinding your way to impact, you're probably just accumulating stress. If you're dancing, you're present. You're enjoying the movement itself.
So, bringing this all back to the beginning, we have a fundamental choice to make.
Every single morning.
We wake up and we either await instructions,
Or we create something different.
we focus on money and accumulation.
Or we focus on impact and connection.
And I think the image that best summarizes this whole deep dive, the antidote to that cheapness of death we started with, is the one Marcus Aurelius leaves us with, the ripened olive.
It is a beautiful image to close on. He says we should pass through life and eventually fall like a ripe olive, praising the earth that nourished it and grateful to the tree that gave it growth.
That is so different from the screaming, scratching, desperate clinging that we usually associate with the end of life or loss of status.
It's the ultimate statement of impact. The olive doesn't cling to the branch. It fulfills its nature. It becomes what it was meant to be, and then it lets go with gratitude.
It's not fearful, it's fulfilled.
Exactly. Because it knows it did what it was supposed to do. It didn't just accumulate water and sun, it turned them into something.
Right. When you focus on accumulation, you live in fear of losing what you have. When you focus on impact, on giving, on creating, you live with the generosity of that olive. You're grateful for the chance to have grown. So here's the question for you listening right now. You are going to fall eventually. The branch will let go. The question isn't how long you hang on. The question is, what will you create before you do?
And will you do it awaiting instructions, or will you write your own story?
Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time.